on the trip, beyond the haze, we're lighting up these shadow waves. Ketamine dreams.
Welcome back to Conscious Healing, Beyond the Trip, hosted by Dr. Jason Harris. Each week, Dr. Harris explores the world of ketamine and other psychedelics, uncovering how they're helping to treat mental health conditions and chronic pain disorders.
This podcast is intended for educational purposes only. The information shared should not be considered medical advice. Always consult with your physician or a qualified healthcare professional before making any changes to your medication or treatment plan. Please be aware that some of the substances and treatments discussed on this podcast may be illegal in certain jurisdictions. We do not endorse or encourage the use of illicit substances. Welcome back to the show. Today we have a very special guest, a true American hero, Jeff Foster. Jeff is a veteran who served our country overseas, and like many of our veterans, he's faced significant challenges with PTSD since returning home. But Jeff's story is one of hope and healing, as he's found remarkable relief through ketamine treatments. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on.
Jeff, let's start at the beginning. Can you walk us through your military service, what your role was, and where you were deployed?
I was an infantry sergeant. I served in both Afghanistan and Iraq. I found both places to be completely polar opposite. Afghanistan, early in the war, there was no real fighting in the area I was in. There was still plenty of danger. There was privation, and the living experience was not real great. But Iraq was opposite. The living conditions were pretty remarkable, completely air-conditioned, heated, comfortable for the most part. But outside the wire was completely different. So this is mid-war. There's a thing called the Surge going on. I was in the northern city, Mosul, which is kind of this urban jungle, sort of rabbit warren of enemy traps. It was pretty tough. My unit had to do a lot of counter-ambush operations to take the fight to the enemy because that would be the only way we would survive. We're hugely outnumbered. And so we were in fighting. My battalion was in fighting virtually every single day. We lost a lot of men, both killed and wounded. But what I saw through that, as much as that might sound real terrifying, and it was certainly at times, I saw the most extreme acts of friendship. They're unimaginable. There are no words to even explain it. These came out particularly during things that like rescue missions. If vehicles were knocked out, guys were wounded, sometimes even killed. Guys would do absolutely reckless and unbelievable things to go save, or even an attempt, because remember too, like you go out, there's no guarantee you're even going to make it to the guys. So I'd see people do just absolutely wild things, again, it's just a chance to save somebody else. And that pure act of friendship is something which I know was there and still inside of our hearts today. I want to see that continue, even in the modern, even as we move forward to today.
It's clear that you faced some incredibly difficult situations. When you returned home, what were some of the initial symptoms or struggles you noticed now that you identified as PTSD?
Yeah, so I'll say this to speak not just as myself, but as someone who's witnessed it in many people. It's not the same for everybody. And a lot of veterans even tell themselves that they don't have it. There's been a rapid stigmatization of it in recent era. But one thing I think that people need to realize is that it comes out so differently in so many different people. So what I can say to myself is that I've seen kind of a growth of apathy at times in tough situations. I won't necessarily feel the emotions that I should be feeling or what are normal. We can get into that later about when it comes to healing, but I've seen probably burnout being the one that's almost universal amongst everybody, where guys will be going great, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they're just like, I don't say they lose interest, but it takes longer to get things done. That's been huge in my case. I've had to reschedule things and what I'm doing just to get something done. I've seen extreme behaviors. Those extreme behaviors oftentimes lead to substance abuse and ultimately suicide, and that's something we'll go into in a minute too, but PTSD is something that's put into our primordial, like whatever we are as human beings is in our, what they say is the parasympathetic nervous system is like this idea that a lion is chasing you. Well, the lions no longer chasing you, but years later you may perceive that, and it pops back up in a situation where that's not even appropriate. And so people have a hard time sometimes keeping that at bay. suppressing it. Okay, I know I'm not supposed to be upset right now, but it still is there with you, even if you're suppressing it. And so that's something that has to be dealt with.
Jeff, that sounds like an immense burden to carry. What was the trajectory of your mental health in the years following your service? Did the symptoms get worse? Did you try any other forms of treatment before you tried ketamine?
One of the things I found was, particularly when I was in school and college, finishing up my undergrad, and then I went on later to do a graduate degree, was that writing papers and things would be incredibly stressful, staying up long hours. When I hadn't really ever done that since Iraq. It was starting to, again, cause that sort of burnout. I did seek treatment with a counselor, and she was very helpful for a period of time, but I felt like I plateaued with that. We even did things like EMDR therapy, which I thought were helpful to a point. Again, I plateaued with that. I'd heard that there was a doctor out of South Louisiana who was working with like acupuncture. And while I couldn't travel all the way to South Louisiana, it had me search out acupuncture and deep tissue massages and things like that where I was in. And that was very helpful as well. And so at some point when I was in seminary at SMU, there was a talk about mental health, because people that are in ministry oftentimes have issues with mental health as well. And because they're taking care, they're being this healer, but not, they're kind of taking on everyone else's burdens, but not helping their own. So self-care is a large percentage of it. And there was this whole talk about psychedelics in the realm of mental health treatment. And what I thought was interesting is that they'd said that they've been around for decades and that they hadn't really been completely acknowledged. But simultaneous to that, there was also talk in the veteran community of that. And I thought, well, that's interesting that both the medical community, the religious community, and as well as the veteran community are all sort of talking about this thing that's going on the sidelines. I thought, well, I might check into that at some point. And then fast forward a few years, I mentioned earlier veteran suicide. I want to actually kind of pause and tell you a little something that happened to me. When I left the Army, I was driving out the base and I had this thought in my mind. I don't even know where it came from, but it was this idea that, okay, well, you're done losing friends. It was true for a period of time, but then the war in Afghanistan started really heating up. And then all of a sudden I had several friends killed and seriously wounded in Afghanistan. These are all guys that I'd served with. And I thought, here I am in school, I can't even help my friends. I mean, I can't go and be with them or anything like that. And then all of a sudden those kind of tapered off. The war started to kind of wind down there. And so the dying stopped there. And then fast forward about a year later, that's when the suicide started. And the suicide started picking up at a pace that now supersedes the number of men we lost in combat in some of these incredibly tough sectors. And that's the part that I found just absolutely shocking. How do you help like that? You can't. You're not near the people. In some cases, you haven't even talked to these people in years. There were two things that happened. One was a friend of mine named Hawk, and I found out years later that he died, and I'm wondering why didn't I hear that he died? And then another one that hit close to home was a guy named Michael Evans. He was just this normal guy as a police officer, had his stuff together, wife and 4 kids. And then he took his life, and friends and I got together and we went to bury Evans and spoke at his funeral. And there was this, again, it was eerily similar to combat in that we put something like 25 guys were at Evans' funeral. Okay. And in the background of us burying our friend, we were back in Mosul, and in the sense that the war never really left us. We dealt with it with dignity. We helped Emily, his widow, the children. We helped in every way we could, but it just wasn't enough. We hadn't stopped it from happening. Emily and I have been talking off and on about, like, what can we do? I mean, nothing we can do to bring Michael back. There's nothing. But in that also, I started realizing that I was burned out from just work and maybe never taking a break. And, I've literally thrown the kitchen sink at all this stuff, between being very religious, being very community oriented. I love serving in church. I have a construction company. So I think about the things I used to do to deconstruct buildings, and now I construct them. You know what I mean? And so I find that very rewarding. But yet my family has been just beyond measure. My wife, Lindsay's been amazing. My kids are amazing. My parents are amazing. My family's amazing. Everybody. So I feel like I'm overly, how do you put it? I'm overly blessed in these things. And yet here I am still struggling with it. Again, this physical aspect of PTSD. So then I thought about ketamine treatment and I thought, hey, it's worth a shot. And so Googled and found you and went, I've done the process as close to how it's supposed to be done. And I've had some major breakthroughs in it. Maybe if you want me to talk about those?
Yeah, well, that's our next question.
Yeah.
If you want to hear more about Michael and Emily's story, check the link below to the CNN interview that Emily did. I'll post that down in the comments below. So, Jeff, at what point did you or your doctor consider ketamine as a treatment option? And what was your initial reaction to the idea? So I just want to know, what was your initial thoughts when you heard about ketamine, when you started looking into ketamine treatments, when you visited my webpage, when we first met and we first talked? How long you've been coming to see us here?
About 18 months. It's been, you say, approximately a year.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, it's been a while.
And yeah, so that's what's interesting is that I felt immediate relief, okay, from ketamine treatment. I knew that there was this physical aspect that like I couldn't, as I hit these other plateaus, I couldn't get past the physical aspect of it, okay, which is affecting every other aspect of my life too. And one of the things I found really interesting about it was this aspect of immediate relief, okay? And all of a sudden, as that immediate relief happened, other areas of my life started falling into place. And they happened at various different times. But the two that really stick out most in my mind as the immediate relief was about 7 or 8 months into the ketamine treatments. It was right after first of the year. I remember that because my sister had given me a book called Say Nothing, which is about the Irish Republican Army. And the whole book, people can read whatever they want to. Some people say it's the Band of Brothers of the IRA or something like that, but it's not. It's actually a whole story about PTSD. If you actually had PTSD and understood it, you'd realize that's actually what the whole thing is about. And you realize that these people were struggling hugely, okay? And as I was taking ketamine and reading both the book and watching the series on FX, all of a sudden I was watching part of the series and I started crying during it. I had not cried like that. I mean, I cried when my children were born, but it's a different form of crying. I would have been very apathetic toward, okay, these are soldiers or these are freedom fighters or insurgents, whatever you want to call them. They're fighting for what they believe in. And that's just, we're going to have to just do what they're doing. And the British on the other side. And I would have felt pretty, very black and white about it. And all of a sudden here I am in the gray, looking at neither side, looking at both sides as kind of victims and actors in their own thing. I felt these people's struggle. The fact that I was crying was the most beautiful thing that had ever happened because I'd cried in war. And the second thing happened actually just in the last month was out of nowhere, my handwriting came back. I don't know this for a fact, but I've survived a few IED hits and I suspect my handwriting was affected by that. It's hard to explain, but out of nowhere, my ability to write very sharply has come back. I have to still work on it a little bit, but the fact that it's even there is something that it's just like the empathy thing. And then the handwriting, the fact that these are just things that showed back up out of nowhere. It's like, okay, so you're telling me after all the years of dealing with this, these two things just show up out of nowhere.
That's awesome.
You know what I mean? Like, and I'm not saying that can happen for everybody. I'm just saying what I experienced.
Yeah.
And it's been huge for me. I feel like if that has helped me, then who else could it help?
Yeah.
So I haven't gone to the VA in over 15 years. And I recently went to them and I told them I was on ketamine treatments and they looked at me like I was crazy. And they're like, oh, really? And then and some of them is interesting. Some of the doctors were like, hey, I want to know more about it. And you could tell that they were like they're like, you're the first one I've ever met that's doing this. Tell me more about it. And the other ones were like, that's not acceptable, and this and that. And the other, like, well, okay, well, I have another doctor that says it's okay. So it hasn't affected my life negatively. So I'm going to keep on pressing on. So.
Sure.
But anyway.
Yeah, for some reason, the Shreveport VA seems to be negative against it. You go to the Little Rock VA, they actually offer ketamine treatments there. It's ridiculous how much there's a big disparity in between. So let's get into the specifics of the treatment. Can you describe what a typical session is like for you? And I know everyone's different, but what do you feel during the experience? What do you feel during the treatment?
Gosh, all manners of, I've had ones that are For the most part, I try to get into a really good headspace before I do them. So I'm very much contemplative. I'm a big believer in contemplative prayer, kind of like, so I try to put myself, my heart, my mind into that before I do it. And then actually will do some of that even during the treatment. So I'm not, completely wiped out or out of it. It's just that you're in a different mode of being is the best way I can explain it. But I've had a couple, which I'm not going to lie to you, were terrifying, but they were positive in the sense that I feel like whatever I was working through in that scenario was something that brought me to, while it might've been terrifying in that moment, over the next week, I felt almost like a complete lift of burden off my chest. I don't really have a way of explaining it other than that, but then you realize, again, as I mentioned earlier, some of these things that start in your life start to fall into place better and faster and easier. Perhaps one of the interesting things is that at times it can make you more irritable afterwards, but that's one of those things that you have to recognize and say, okay, so I might be irritable right now. You just tell people around you, hey, I'm working through something right now. If you be kind of chill with me, I'll work through it. And so you have to be bigger than the thing. You know what I mean? And it's a big thing. Ketamine's a big thing. So you have to be bigger than it. And that's a tough road to hoe, as they say. So my one thing I would suggest to people is that they go into that with their head space, their heart space in the right place. If you need to just not do it or something one day, just don't and just push off on it, or just go into it knowing that it can affect you. But the other times it affects you negatively as opposed to times it affects you positively it's not even comparison. It's like 90-10 or even higher than that, perhaps. Just know that it's working through. It's telling you that lion isn't going to attack you outside your cave and inside your inner caveman, if you will. So it's helping release that burden.
A lot of what you're describing there is set and setting, your mindset, and then, the setting that we provide here. I do have a video on that. So if you want to go back on our videos and watch that, I'll put a link to set and setting so you can get that mindset before you come in, so you can prepare, what are you going to do afterwards? How are you going to deal with everything that you unwrapped and that burden that it puts back on you, but it does help you deal with it. So right. Good. That was a fascinating description. Since you've started the treatments, what are your most significant changes? I think we've touched on that a little bit. You've noticed in your daily life, and how's your relationship with your family changed?
Yes. So again, as I mentioned, kind of a sort of a return to this empathy that I remember having before being in the military. It's almost like part of me has been on break and I've had to do some catch up. And with that, I feel like my relationships with people, both my family and friends, coworkers, etc., have really gotten deeper. I've had to kind of be, again, completely honest with people and say, look, it's not that all of a sudden I didn't care or whatever. And that's helping kind of redefine different boundaries and different capabilities and different depths that haven't been there. It's a little bit of a daily experience I'm still working through, but it's a total grace from God, in my opinion, because it's allowing me to get out and experience and do things that I haven't been able to do fully. If not, I've been there partially because I haven't been just totally gone from it, but you don't realize what you don't have until you don't have it. Here I am having it back because it's not like it wasn't there from the time of childhood to then. It's just that these things got dulled, but then this other sense of who I was got stronger because of combat. So it's not like it was all a negative trait. It was an interesting thing. I just know that my relationship with my wife is deeper and better and more understanding. And that's a two-way street. So that's been positive. I mean, it's and I feel like because of that, I can also recognize in other people when they're having trouble. And empathetically, I can go, okay, how do we fix this? And do it in ways that I think are right for that person. So, because I do have that training from grad school. And so I can certainly employ it, I think, better without being burnt out. I mean, because that was the other thing too, is you carry someone else's burden. Yeah. Who heals the healers? And so now I can be a bigger healer and more aware. That's the thing, is awareness. Like, you just have to be aware. So
that leads me to our next section. So that's incredible. Your story's amazing. I appreciate you being here. So what would you say to other veterans who are struggling with PTSD and are considering ketamine, but are hesitant or skeptical, or they're getting pushback from their family, their friends, their doctors? What would you tell them?
So first and foremost, I think the big thing is that I'm not a doctor, but I would assume that it's a contestant for more people than are being certainly told that it's an option for them. Let's just say that.
No,
Statistically speaking,
absolutely.
that has to be a true statement. I definitely think that it can't be right for some people just because of certain situations and who they are or whatever they have going on in life. Or maybe this isn't a contestant for them right now. Maybe they needed to do some work before that. I think the big thing for veterans is that veterans need to realize that they need to be in community, because we were in community, certainly, whether you were a combat veteran or there's always this rub. I'm getting a little bit off topic, but
No, you're fine. No, you're fine.
Yeah,
We're going to get there because we've got a couple more things that we're going to talk about. I know you've got something you want to talk about. I've got something I want to add in there.
Sure.
But no, everything we're going to add on now is going to expand on that.
Dovetail. Okay.
Perfect.
All right,
so go do it.
So here's the thing, is that community to me is important, because veterans, when they get out, so we dealt with all this stuff as veterans, okay, as in a community. And then we get out, all of a sudden we're by ourselves, or we're just with our family unit, and that's isolating. And then that causes a chain reaction of events. Well, because of that, I think that veterans have to find a community. But it's not just veteran versus civilian. We're all together in this. For instance, you're not a veteran, but you're part of my community, right? And I think that's important, that veterans need to realize they can go to somebody other than a veteran for help. Just because Dr. Harris hasn't been in combat doesn't mean he's not helpful, A, and B, look into some commonalities. You know, you're an ER doctor. I don't want to go work in an ER. If you want to go and raid a house or something, I might be the guy to take with you, but I don't want to go work in an ER. So that's something that we have as a commonality. It may be different life paths, but God put us all here together to experience that. We need to find that community to help heal. And until we do that, you're not even in the position to take things like ketamine. You're not even in the position to go and help people, because part of being healed is also helping others.
Right. Yeah.
And so if you're not in that place to do that, then you're just not in the place to do that. But that doesn't mean you can't get there. It doesn't mean you can't get there rapidly, but you need to recognize where you are.
Yeah.
That the rescue mission has to be for you.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about different things about, how can we help more veterans? Tell me about the Mullet Run. Tell me about the Mullet Run. Something that you want to set up and you're working on getting set up for to bring awareness to veteran suicide and help our amazing veterans.
Okay, so first and foremost, and this is not to take away from any veteran organizations out there. There are a lot of veteran organizations that are trying to help. I'm not going to name them by name, but we all know who they are, okay? Yeah. Because I'm this anonymous guy just speaking out from the veteran community, I'll say that they've done a lot. But I find, because I am a general contractor, and I found that the best jobs we've ever done are the ones where we kind of put together all these guys and gals that are specialists, and then all of a sudden it comes together like an orchestra. Any one instrument playing is great, but if it plays too loud or there's not the other stuff to balance it, then it's just music. It's just loud music, okay? And so likewise, using that analogy, I think that all these veteran organizations are great in their silo, but we need to get them out of their silo and get everybody working together at the table. Who's bringing everybody to the table? Okay. So we need that. Remember, we keep talking about community. Well, what is community? Community isn't a silo. That's not really community. It's close, but it's not really there, is it? So what I'm going to argue is that every group should get together. Just after Michael's funeral, Emily and I were speaking, and I don't know where it came up, but she was so fighting mad. She was so mad. She was like, my husband died, not in the war, but because of the war. And I'm so mad. I want to fight. And the way I'm going to fight is I'm going to stop other suicides from happening. I thought, okay, well, if it's just going to be the two of us that run into the city to fight, and it's just the two of us, well, I guess that's going to be it. And before you know it, all these other people have come to the aid of that. But the idea of it's like, I was like, so immediately I go pop in back in my mind back in a seminary, and I think, how do you get somebody's attention for something? And I thought, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Evans had all these skits, like where he'd throw on these like stupid mullet wigs, and like he'd have like these jorts where he's like, it's not appropriate to wear shorts that short, and like tie-dye American, like American Eagle t-shirts and all this stuff, and like American flag, and you're just like, what on earth is this nonsense? And he's out there playing with fireworks on the 4th of July, and you're like, this is just unbelievable stuff. And I thought, what if we all put on mullets and did a mullet run? And Emily goes, that's perfect. And there was no other discussion ever than that. It was just like, that's it. That's what we're going to do. And so we kind of let this sort of like thing dwell for a little bit. And then all of a sudden I heard about the Army 10-mile run from this guy who's like kind of the Army's first sergeant, this guy at Fort Poirier. Hopefully I'm saying his name correctly, but he's this first sergeant down at Fort Hood. And he's like, oh, I'm going to do this 10-mile run. And I thought, oh no, that's where we need to do the 10-milers. Like, I haven't run 10 miles since 2008, but I'm getting in shape for it now. And so maybe that's what we got to do. So several other guys and gals have said, absolutely, we're going to join. So I don't care if we only have a handful of people running in mullet wigs, but we're going to have people running mullet wigs, and we're going to continue doing this to raise awareness because we want to bring people together. We want to bring together. If you are a veteran, whether you're, infantry, I don't care if you're, what we used to call like hard MOSs or soft MOSs. I don't care if you're combat or non-combat. I don't care if you're a veteran or non-veteran. If you're passionate about helping veterans, you want to stop veteran suicide, and you want to go on a rescue mission, then let's all do this.
Yeah,
let's
absolutely.
do it.
That's awesome.
So that's where we are with this. I don't know where we're going from it, but we're going to save some people. If we save one life, if we just save one life, or even attempt to save one life, it'll all be worth it.
Oh, you're giving me chills. That's awesome. Yeah, no, that's amazing. Is there, I know you're real early in this. Is there a website set up for this yet to raise money yet or anything like that? And again, we're filming this. We can always add in later on. If you're interested, check below once we get a little more information on the mullet run. And then the next thing I'm going to talk about, once we get a little more information on that, it'll be added below.
Yeah, so we do sort of have a loose organization. It's actually very well organized. There's a guy named Sergeant Major Pippin, who's arguably one of the more colorful characters I've ever met the entire time I was in the Army. He has a thing called Warrior Ranch in Graham, Texas. We get together there every so often. We do not have a 501c3 set up yet for the mullet run, but we certainly will do that very shortly. Right now, we're just in the get the word out, raise awareness, get things going kind of phase, but it will be rapidly developing over the next, weeks and months.
Perfect. And that's going to bring me to my next section, to my 501c3 that Samantha, my wife, and I are setting up, called Beyond the Battle Foundation. And you're going to be on the board. We've discussed that. Jeff is going to help us. And the premise and what we're raising money for is to provide ketamine and psychedelic treatments for veterans who can't afford it. Unfortunately, insurance doesn't cover the cost of it. VA, especially the Shreveport VA, is not on board with it. And there's just so many people out there who need it, they can't afford it. So we're going to raise that money. We're going to make awareness. We're going to provide treatments, whether it'll be a need-based. It'll be a sliding scale. We've talked about that, because maybe they just need $100 per treatment. Maybe they need a hotel to stay or somewhere to stay. So we're going to be raising money, hopefully in conjunction with the Mullet Run, and we're going to provide these needed life-saving treatments for our veterans.
Right.
I'm glad you're going to join us on the board, and you're going to help us get the word out. And again, we'll have some more information on that. Everything's with the lawyers. And you know how long that takes. So we'll get that information. Again, Beyond the Battle Foundation, we're still working on getting everything set up. It costs money, it costs time, and we're working on it, but we'll get there and bring that information and hopefully bring the funding to, to provide those treatments for the patients. If this site or this channel, if my podcast is ever monetized, my plan is to every dime that we collect will go towards building this podcast, and it'll go straight towards the Beyond the Battle Foundation. That's my goal. That's my goal with this, is to raise awareness and to bring that funding to patients and veterans who need it. Perfect. So, perfect. Jeff, your story is truly inspiring. Thank you so much for your service to our country and for your bravery and sharing your journey with us today. I know it probably wasn't easy, and 18 months ago, you probably couldn't have sat here and talked about it. So I do appreciate you being here. It's been an honor. It's been an honor to getting to know you over the last 18 months, and I look forward to working closely with you to help stop veteran suicide. All right, so now for a quick update on psychedelics in the news. This is going to be on political support for psychedelics. Following a setback with the FDA, RFK Jr. and other officials have advocated for psychedelic therapies, emphasizing on the potential benefits for mental health treatment. In particular, Texas is moving forward independently with a $50 million study into ibogaine effects on addiction and PTSD. This initiative receives matched funding from universities and hospitals, showcasing a growing interest in these therapies despite federal hurdles. Down below, there'll be a link to that article where you can read more about it. Stay tuned next week for our next episode where we will debunk the common myths about ketamine therapy. Lots of crazy rumors out there, so we're going to try to debunk those. All right, this podcast isn't medical advice. It's a conversation, one that's evolving. So talk to your doctor, ask hard questions, but remember your provider might not be up to date on the latest research or might be closed-minded to the use of psychedelics, even though the science is there. Stay skeptical, but stay open-minded, because sometimes the most important healing paths are the ones we nearly forgot. Thanks for joining me on Conscious Healing Beyond the Trip. I'm Dr. Jason Harris. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.